Good afternoon, and this is Coach Chet. We have the last day of summer, the last weekend of summer, I guess. So I hope you are all enjoying some cooler weather on your runs this weekend. We certainly are up here in Massachusetts. It feels like fall has really arrived, and for runners, that's usually pretty good news. But today I wanted to talk about this is kind of our fall running special, discussing the things to look ahead for, the things we are changing the last day from summer as the weather cools down a bit. But first, I wanted to go ahead and start by answering a few questions that we had from this week. So we got 3 different questions, all really good questions. So we'll just take those in order. Now, the first one was a little bit strangely worded, but I think I know what this person meant by it. The question was, are the miles in the training you plan an upper bound or a lower bound? Meaning, can we add a mile or 2 for easy runs, or do you discourage it? So I think what they're asking here is when we put forth your training plans, and it seems like this person may have the basic training plan that comes with Runners Connect. How flexible is that plan? Do we give you the most miles your body can handle, or do we give you the least amount of bodies your amount of miles your body can handle, so that way you can add to it? The truth is that it's totally different from athlete to athlete, and it depends on a lot of different factors. If you come to us and you have, if you're just coming back from an injury, or your mileage has been historically low and you're trying to build back up, we're going to take a conservative approach with you. But if you're someone who has had, generally high mileage, we'll ask you in that initial questionnaire what your highest mileage has been, and we will try and push you up to that, if not a little beyond. And so the answer to that question is both. But in terms of adding or taking away miles from your runs. In general, in terms of taking off miles from your runs, lessening your workload, we see this happen a lot because our training plan works great for an athlete on paper, meaning an athlete who has all the time in the world to run. But for those of you who have jobs and life and things that get in the way, there are definitely days that we understand that you're not able to get in your full run, or sometimes a day where running itself may not be a legitimate possibility. And so for those days, yes, we understand that if you need to cut off a mile or 2 to make, a work call or a conference call or hop in the car and be somewhere, we understand that. But I do always encourage people, if you're planning on cutting some things short, there are a few ways to go about that. Number 1, do not cut off your warm-up or cool down for a hard workout. I see this a ton on the stream. People say, oh, I was running short on time, so I cut down my cool down from 2 miles to just a quarter mile, hopped in the car and left. Your cool down is vitally important. It may seem like, oh, once the hard work is done, that's pretty much it for the day. The cool down is just extra, but it's not. The cool down is there for a specific purpose. It's there to move oxygen-rich blood through your damaged muscles, the muscles that you just did a ton of damage to. And one of the worst things you can do is to hop in the car immediately after a hard workout and let your muscles contract, seize up. You're going to be so much more stiff and sore the next day if you do that. So for the sake of your recovery, do not skimp on a warm-up or cool down. If you know you're going to be short for time on a certain day and you have a hard workout that day, post on the stream, ask one of us coaches, say, hey, do you mind flipping my week? I have a really busy day on Tuesday and I see that I have a tempo run. I'm not going to be able to fit the entire thing in. Can you help me out with that? And we would be happy to rearrange things. If you're feeling great, let's say you're feeling great on a general easy run, I am not opposed to you adding a mile or 2 on a day like that. But all things within moderation. I even hesitate to say that because some people, if I give them an inch with that, they'll take a mile and they say, oh, well, I felt great, so I ran an extra 5 miles today at the end of an 18-mile long run. I made it 23 miles. Well, that's dangerous. So adding to your hard workouts or your long runs is generally not advised because those are a specific distance for a reason. Your easy runs are where you have a little bit more room to play with it. So in terms of the fluidity of your easy days, that's where you have a little bit of room to, you have some flexibility there and say, okay, well, I would rather do a shorter day here and a longer day here because of time constraints and schedules like that. But in general, if you have questions about if the mileage itself overall seems too low in your plan or too high for that matter, we need you to speak up and share with us because we can't read your minds. And the really tough thing about it is being someone who coaches online. I have a problem with that. I'm not able to see my athletes run. I can't tell when they're tired. I can't tell how they're feeling unless they share that with me. So once they tell me, you know what, I'm exhausted, this workload is too much, then I know to lessen it. If they never complain, I'm going to assume they're doing fine with the workload, and I'm going to keep it the same or even bump it up a little bit because they're not complaining. So be vocal, be willing to share about how you're feeling as you're running. And if you want more, or if you want less, that's certainly fine for you to ask for. And you know, if you ask for too much, we will let you know. We'll say, you know, it's a little, you're getting into this dangerous zone, pushing your mileage that high right now. So that's a really good question. But in terms of, I guess the answer to that is, can you add a mile or two for your easy runs? Share your desire to do that with us before you do it. But generally, I'm going to let someone do that. If they say, you know, I feel great and I want to run a little bit more, I'll say, okay, well, let's, you know, bump up your easy Monday 5 mile to a 6 or a 7 mile. That's fine. Okay, the second question we got this week was, when is it time to pull the plug? If I am feeling sore on my foot or my leg, but I'm not in pain when I walk or run, shall I just keep icing and keep training, or do I need to stop? Home remedies, the ice and the ball, seem to help tremendously. Okay, so when is it time to pull the plug? That is a really, really tricky question. And again, this is one of those questions that varies entirely. It's a case-by-case scenario with every single athlete. In my opinion, there are two kinds of pain. There are probably more than two, but in the terms of the aches and pains on your body, there are two different kinds of pain. One is the one that that is totally normal. It comes along with training. For me personally, I've shared this with you guys, but about 80% of the time, at least something hurts. I had a race and a really, really high mileage day yesterday, and today out there, basically everything hurt. My quads were just shredded. My calves were tight. Both my hip flexors hurt when I was running up the hills. That is the kind of wear and tear that I'm expecting as I'm in the midst of marathon training, about to head into the taper. You know, that kind of pain is normal. On a day like today, I'm not going to say, oh, well, things hurt, so I'm not going to go run. I would never pull the plug when I felt like this. If you have something that is a very high level of pain in a very isolated location, those are the things you need to look out for. For instance, if I was out there running today and just one of my quads, not both of them, bilateral pain is generally a good thing, because it shows that it's the work that you did that put the same amount of damage into both sides of your body. Okay, so if I'm having bilateral quad pain, that's because I had a very, very steep downhill sections of the race yesterday that beat up my quads. Whereas if I had simply just one quad acting up, if the other quad was fine and just one quad was throbbing or there was a sharp pain, that's something to look out for. So unilateral pain is the #1 red flag. Okay, so if something hurts on one side more than the other, that's generally not a good thing. Okay, but again, you have to use your own discretion, saying, is this just the aches and pains that I should be expecting? Is this something I can train through, or is this something serious? So another way to tell, one of the things that is a good sign versus a bad sign, if you have an ache or a pain that gets better as the run progresses, if you're feeling it a lot when you start out in that first mile or two, but it warms up, it feels better throughout the run, you aren't even feeling it by the end, that is a good sign. The bad sign is when something, maybe you don't feel it at first, but after a couple miles, it starts kicking in and gets worse and worse and worse until it either it carries on all the way through your run, or it stops you from running altogether. That is a bad sign. That is generally an injury. So those are two red flags to look out for. Unilateral pain, meaning in one isolated spot on one side of your body. Although it can happen, I guess it's very rare, but you can, you know, have an injury where you simultaneously strain both quads or both Achilles, I suppose, but it's pretty rare in terms of something that goes. It's going to be one side that goes first. It's just the way that the body works. So if it's an injury, if you're looking at something unilateral and something that is getting worse as you run. So the question here that this athlete asked was, if I'm feeling sore on my foot or my leg, but I'm not in pain when I walk or run, shall I just keep icing and training? My answer to that would be yes. If it's something that I am not feeling when I'm running, then I'm going to keep running. That is my general answer for that. Obviously, if it's something that is hurting only when you're running, that's not a good sign. But if it's something that, you know, you're feeling a lot when you're walking around, a lot of people, this is something like plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis in general is something that people can train through. A lot of people choose not to, but running doesn't necessarily make it worse. Being barefoot all the time makes it worse. Having shoes that are broken down makes it worse. But if you're running properly and correctly on the right surfaces, you can train through plantar fasciitis and come through the other side of it completely healthy. I've done that before, and I know plenty of people who have. But for me, I'm saying generally, not for any specific injury here, but in general, if you are having a pain outside of running, I would continue to run through it. That's like me saying, you know, I fell this Thursday. I scraped up my hand really bad. My hand hurts. It still hurts to take a shower or do dishes. But it doesn't hurt. Well, obviously when I'm running, it's not affecting me. So obviously I'm not going to cease running because my hand hurts. So, keep that in mind as you progress through the season, that especially if you're training for a marathon, aches and pains happen. Absolutely. And one of the biggest things that I see that so many people are surprised about, but it happens almost every time I'm expecting it, within the last 3 weeks of training, within the taper, almost everyone I know has experienced some sort of taper tweak, meaning an injury flares up, something comes up within the final few weeks of training. This is normal. There's a lot of theories on why this happens. One of my favorites is that, our body, on a deep subconscious level, it knows what we're about to go through is going to be hard and it's going to be painful to run a race. So it's trying to give us reasons not to do it. But the truth is, more often than not, these taper tweaks are nothing to be really concerned about. So if you have these little aches and pains, something subsisting for more than a week, maybe get it checked out. But a few days here and there of something, flaring up or being a little tender or sore, take care of it. Sure, ice it, gently massage it. I'm not a huge proponent of stretching. Neither is my coach. He bases a lot of his training off of Arthur Lydiard, who was a great New Zealand coach, coached several Olympic gold medalists, and he was very, very much an anti-stretching proponent. He did not believe in stretching at all. So it's not something that I do, but if it's something that you find has worked for you in your training or to help cure a specific injury, absolutely. Foam rolling is great. Take care of your body, but try not to panic if things pop up. It's not the end of the world. They will generally pass within a couple of days. It can also help to look back through your training log. If you keep a training log, there's so many times that I look back at my training log and I will see these moments where, oh my gosh, I'm injured, I don't know what's going on, and then 3 days later I'm fine and I have a great workout. So just understand that these things ebb and flow, and give yourself some room to breathe when these things pop up. Try not to panic. I know that sounds it's very easy to say and not very easy to do, but don't be a hypochondriac when it comes to your training. A little bit of pain here and there is normal. Marathon training, it takes a huge toll on your body, but your body can adjust to it. So have faith in what your body's able to do. The third question we have today was, if I don't have a chance for tune-up races, how do I know if I am ready? And if I do a tune-up race, is a 5K really going to tell me how I will do when I have to add an extra 10 miles to it? So it sounds like in this circumstance, the athlete is running a half marathon, and his or her tune-up race is going to be a 5K. So their question is, well, how is a 5K really going to show me what kind of fitness I'm in when I have to add another 10 miles onto the end of it? Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a fair question to ask, but tune-up racing is one of those things, especially when those of us preparing for a marathon. It's not very often that you'll see someone prepare for a marathon and their tune-up race is a full 26.2 miles. Generally, you'll see 10Ks, 10 miles, half marathons as tune-up races. And these are great because marathon training is such that, another Arthur Lydiard concept is that marathon training, the higher mileage, the higher volume workouts are going to make you fitter at every single distance down to the mile even. So going out and running a race like I did yesterday, I ran a 10K race 3 weeks and 1 day before my marathon as a tune-up race. And some people would say, well, you have to run another 20 miles. So what does that show you? Well, I can judge my 10K fitness in relationship to what I've run the 10K in before. So if I'm racing a 10K on a very, very hard hilly course and I do somewhat well, I say, okay, well, I'm very, very fit right now. Even despite the fact that the race I'm doing is farther, I'm going to be running slower and I should be able to sustain that. So if you don't have a chance for tune-up races, I guess this question really had two halves, but if I don't have a chance for tune-up races, how do I know if I'm ready? Sometimes you don't. Sometimes a tune-up race doesn't fit into your schedule. Maybe you have a very, very strict work regimen and you're unable to travel to a race, or there's maybe you had a tune-up race that was canceled. That happens all the time. If you are unable to get in a tune-up race, there are definitely workouts that can tell you what kind of fitness you're in. It's interesting. Coach Danny, he wrote to me last week and he said, Sarah, I'm just curious, what are some big marathon workouts that you run before a race that can really tell you what kind of fitness you're in? So I shared with him a few of my favorite workouts, and some of them, is when you have a long sustained run, but you split up several chunks of it into marathon efforts, maybe, and you're running 13 to 15 miles total of that marathon pace. If you're able to do that alone by yourself in the middle of marathon training at high mileage, that should translate pretty well for what you're going to be able to run for 26.2 miles with competition when you are fully tapered. So trust your training. When something says marathon effort, if you're shooting for that goal pace, that's designed to help your body adjust to it. A famous American marathoner, Kim Jones, says that she spent about 30% of her mileage in a marathon buildup at her marathon pace, simply because her body was getting used to that pace and learning how to run at that specific rhythm. So it's really important to do, but there are plenty of workouts that can show you your fitness. One of the ones that comes to mind, we've discussed this a couple times, but Yasso 800s, Bart Yasso, who is I can't think of what his exact title is at Runner's World, but he works at Runner's World, and he came up with this concept of Yasso 800s, meaning in the midst of marathon training, when your mileage is high, if you are to do a workout 10 by 800 all out, and I think it's about 2 minutes rest or 1 minute rest, something like that, but within those 800s, whatever you average, let's say you're running those 800s in 6-minute pace, and that's 3 minutes. He's saying that you take that 3 minutes and you make that hours, you should be able to run a 3-hour marathon. So there's little hints, little predictor workouts like that. So, oh, it looks like we have a comment here. Mike says, for me, the proof of my fitness is in the tempo run, just faster than marathon pace. Up to 7 miles nonstop, and then 2 by 5 mile. Oh, absolutely, yeah. So those are absolutely staple workouts in a number of marathon programs. But having that tempo run that is at your anaerobic threshold. So an athlete like Mike, who runs a 2-hour 57 marathon, his anaerobic threshold pace is going to be quite a bit faster than his marathon pace, because your anaerobic threshold is the point at which your body starts to produce lactic acid just slightly faster than it can clear it away. So at a very slow and steady rate, lactic acid is building in your system. And for most athletes, that's around an hour. For someone like Mike, it might be around a 70-minute mark. So that pace, so whatever he could run for exactly 70 minutes, if he had a gun to his head, said run as hard as you can for 70 minutes and then you won't be able to run anymore, racing that 70 minutes for Mike, maybe like a 10-mile race or slightly farther, that is his anaerobic threshold. So that tempo pace, that 7-mile tempo run nonstop, that is a huge, huge indicator. Not only is it increasing your threshold as you run it, but that can give you a really, really good confidence boost, saying, okay, now I can back off that 10 to 15 seconds per mile and hold that for the marathon. That's going to be easy. That's going to feel great. And then he said 2 by 5 mile. That's another one of my favorite workouts. It's an easy way to sneak in a 10-mile tempo without it feeling like a 10-mile tempo, is having it broken up into 5-mile chunks where all you have to wrap your mind around mentally is 5 miles. I'm just running 5 miles and then I get a break, and then I'm just running 5 miles. And by the time you're done, if a full warm up and cool down, that could be a 16 or 17-mile day. Those are great, great fitness boosts. So for me, and as I shared with Coach Danny, having those long runs with big chunks of tempo effort or marathon effort within them are great ways to see your fitness if you're not able to get to a tune-up race. And again, this year I had planned initially that I was going to run a half marathon tune-up race at the beginning of September, and my plans fell through. I had to be in North Carolina for the Runners Connect camps. But fortunately, I had my friend and coach Tina come up to train with me, and we chose to run. I ran a 13.1 mile time trial basically by myself. So if you want to run a 5K time trial, let's say your tune-up race gets canceled, you had a 10K or a 5K a couple weeks out from a big race and it gets canceled, you can do that by yourself. You can go ahead and go and solo time trialer, or find someone who's a little faster than you and talk them into running that workout as well. That's a great thing to do. So if you can find someone to run that with you, it's definitely foreseeable that you could do your own tune-up race by yourself. Okay, so moving on to our fall running special. The number one thing that I have to bring up in the fall, and I love the fall time, guys. Fall is my absolutely favorite time, not just because I'm a runner and the weather is perfect. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful time to run. But so the number one thing that I have to bring up is hydration, because so many people, they get out of the heat and humidity of the summer and they are completely neglectful in terms of their hydration. So even if the weather is cooler, even if it's not as humid, which means, so basically what humidity does is you're sweating the same amount whether it's humid or not, but humidity prevents the sweat from leaving the surface of your skin. So it basically cripples your body's own personal cooling device. So when you are running in cooler weather and it's not as humid, you're going to be sweating the same amount, but it's going to be, well, actually, I mean, I guess if it's a little cooler, you're not going to be sweating the same amount, but you are going to be sweating, but it's going to be lifting off your skin in such a way that you're not going to notice. You're not going to feel as thirsty. Definitely don't neglect your hydration. This especially goes for people running a fall marathon. So I mentioned Kim Jones earlier. reading her book, which was absolutely fantastic. I would recommend it to any runner. It's called A Dandelion Growing Wild. She was talking about her race where I believe it was where she got second at New York City Marathon, ran 2:27. It was a warm day that day, but she mentions grabbing her bottle, which if you see that bottle right there, that's probably about the right size, maybe 20, 25, 28 ounces. She grabbed her bottle off of the fluid table and she drank literally the entire thing as she was running. For me, I'll grab my bottle off the table, I'll rip off, I'll take my gel, and I'll try and take a few sips if I can. It's very difficult for me to get water in, but during these fall marathons, you're not going to notice that you're getting dehydrated because you're not going to be as thirsty if it's a little cooler weather. Make sure that you are continuing to drink water, a lot of water. When you have it available, take it. Obviously, don't take so much that it's going to be sloshing around in your stomach, but take a good amount that is going to be able to keep you, I guess, keeping you hydrated is a myth. You're not going to stay hydrated. You're going to be dehydrated, but put that dehydration off as long as possible. So in terms of those little cups that you get, those aren't holding very much water. Depending on how much they fill them, maybe 3, 5, maybe 10 ounces at the most. Make sure that you're grabbing maybe one from the beginning of the table, one from the end. Take in as much fluid as you can, even if the weather is a little bit cooler. Okay, so in terms of clothing, fall weather, I've harped on you guys about this a little bit, but I have to do it again because every time we see those first few cold days of fall, I'll notice people on the stream saying, wow, I have no idea what happened, but I pulled my hamstring today. I tweaked this, I tweaked that. When you are running in colder weather, there is just, it's just that old adage that we've heard from way back in PE when they were teaching us to warm up, is that if you have a rubber band and it's in the freezer and you take it out and you yank it, it's going to, it's going to snap. It needs to be warm in order for it to have its proper elasticity. So when you run, that's starting to stretch the rubber band. So if your muscles are cold, that's not a good thing. So heading out the door, if it's under 50 degrees, have pants on. If it's under 50 degrees, I mean it, have layers on, wear a pair of tights or pants or a jacket. You can always shed layers. It is far more worth it, even if it's just 1 or 2% more likely to keep you from getting injured. It's worth it because that 1 or 2% can be the difference from hitting your goal time or not. So make sure that you are bringing layers. Now, planning ahead with weather, in general, if you have just an average smartphone, you ask Siri or whoever you have hourly weather. It'll pop up and it'll show you what kind of weather you can expect for that day. So if you see that a storm is going, especially if you have a long run, you're out there, some of you are out there for 3 or 4 hours during a long run. If you see that a storm is going to blow through, a cold front, rain, snow, anything like that, it is vital that you are prepared for that, even if it's sunny when you leave the house. Now, I want to leave that with also saying that when you leave the house, you shouldn't feel toasty and sweaty and warm. You should feel slightly cool. Again, the little, I guess, the converter that you want to use is you want to dress as if it's 15 degrees warmer outside than it is, because that's how much your body's going to adjust to what it is outside. So if it's if it's 30 degrees, I'm going to say, okay, well, at the end of it, it's going to feel to me like it's 45 degrees. So I'm going to be wearing my tights and I'm going to be wearing my hat and whatever I need, but I will keep in mind that I will probably heat up. I'll probably get warm. So don't just wear, ladies especially, don't just wear, a sports bra and then a jacket, because then you only have 2 options. If you get too hot, you got to take off that jacket and you're going to be too cold with the sports bra. So bring a nice light long sleeve or a tee to wear under that as well. So layer, plan ahead with the weather, especially if you were going to be doing something like an out and back. If you see that thunderstorms moving into the area, a snowstorm is moving into the area, which is, I know it seems crazy because it was just summer. It's still technically summer, but soon, especially up in the northern states and up in Canada, for those of you listening, snow can happen starting this month and the next. So, and sometimes it happens. I've seen it happen in where I lived in Bellingham, Washington. It was 50 degrees when I left. It was sunny, and it was snowing on me by the time I got back home. So plan ahead if you have a very long run to do. If you see that a snowstorm or any storm is going to be moving into the area, maybe don't head out into the woods for a very long out and back, because you could get stuck out there. So plan ahead. If you are someone who drives to your runs, if you drive 15 or 20 minutes to your run, especially if it's raining, especially if it's cold, or even if it's warm and you tend to sweat a lot, bring clothes to change into afterwards, because you see this happen every now and then, where people will finish their run and they will be absolutely hypothermic because it has poured rain, they're freezing, they cannot stay warm enough. I have one run that always comes to mind as the most miserable run I ever did. I had a 28-mile run in Bellingham, Washington, headed up into the mountains. It rained on me the whole time. The temperature actually dropped from 9 o'clock in the morning all the way to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So as I was running, it was getting colder and colder and colder. And by the end of it, I finally pulled down off the mountain, and I'm in this park. I'm about 5 miles from where I lived. And I ran into the bathroom of this park, and I just huddled under the hand dryer. I was so cold. I was just crying because I didn't want to have to run all the way back. And I wish that I had planned to go out and back from my house a few times. So that way, if need be, I could have changed my gloves from the sopping wet gloves that I had, into a nice warm pair of gloves. That would have made my run so much more pleasant. Or if you have, if you're driving out to a run, keep changes of stuff in the car. Keep a nice different jacket in the car that you can run back and grab it if you need to, and head back out again, because that can be the difference between a wonderful run and an absolutely terrible run. Especially the number one thing for people when it rains and things like that is wet socks and wet shoes, because that can cause blisters. So having a nice dry pair of socks can enable you to run 10 miles farther than you would have been able to before, because when you get those wet socks and the blisters start, it's very difficult to keep going once things start hurting, especially on your feet. So just be smart, plan ahead. I guess that's the number one thing that I have in terms of clothing is be smart, plan ahead, and invest in your running, because don't just assume that that every day is going to be that perfect fall day. Fall can be very unpredictable in many areas of the country and the world. So, all right. So the last thing I want to talk about today is actually pretty serious. And it's something that I hate to have to mention, but every now and then things happen, and it's something that we have to talk about. So yesterday, a teammate of mine who had run at Sept for 3 years, a professional runner, he was out running, and he was struck by a car, and he broken leg, broken arm, broken bones in his neck and in his face, and he's still in the hospital unconscious. And it just is one of those things that I struggled with whether or not to talk about this today, but I think for the sake of safety, it's something that I want to bring up, especially because we're losing daylight. It's already now, you're starting to notice that it's getting darker earlier, and these things do happen. So how can we be prepared for something like this? Okay, so the number one thing that I have here, I wrote down a list of things that we need to watch out for when you're out there running at night in the dark, because many of us have to. If you have to run after work, or even, if you run generally at 4 in the afternoon, well, soon it's going to be start getting, dark at 4 in the afternoon. So be reflective. Don't wear black. Don't wear anything that's not going to be very visibly seen from a car's headlights. Okay, so when a car shines on you, have something that shines back. The second thing is be alert. When you run, you should know this by now, but if you're just a beginning runner, you might not. The protocol for running is different than biking. It's different than driving, obviously. When you see a 2-lane traffic here in America, at least, Mike, for you is a little different, the left side of the road. So flip everything that I'm about to say to the other side. But for here in America, cars drive on the right side of the road. You are going to run on the same side of the road that the cars are driving at you. At first, this sounds a little bit odd and counterintuitive, but think of it this way. If you're on the other side of the road, cars are coming at you from behind. You won't be able to see and jump out of the way. Now, bikers, it's a little bit different. You're going 30, 40 miles an hour. You're going to be going with traffic, and you're almost going to treat yourself as if you are a vehicle. Runners, we are not a vehicle. We are going to run facing traffic. So for you, that means running, if you're looking at a road, running on the left side of the road. So the cars are coming down the same side of the street that you're on. Their headlights are coming at you. Run where there is a shoulder or a sidewalk, please, because this is how these things happen, is that it's on roads where there isn't much of a shoulder, night, sometimes unreflective, and I'm not positive about this, but knowing this guy, he may have had headphones in, because he did tend to run with headphones a lot. And I make the same mistake. I run with headphones at night all the time. This has given me a really big jolt of reality to maybe leave the headphones at home in the dark. If you're running and you're facing traffic, that should generally be the safer way to go, because if a car does not see you, they start to swerve, or maybe they're drunk, or they're texting, or they're falling asleep, you can jump out of the way, versus if a car is coming from behind, which is from what I understand of this circumstance, I'm not positive, but I believe he was on the correct side of the road, and the car was on the other side of the road behind him, so not even in his lane, and drifted over and hit him. So that can happen. And in a case like that, it's hard to say what you're supposed to do, but don't have headphones in. If you hear something coming at you, jump. I don't even know how to, stress this enough, but just be safe out there, because every single fall you hear something, you hear something about someone getting hurt, and unfortunately this time it happened to be someone who, you know, had a dream of you know, running in the Olympics, and he was a professional runner, and it's really, really sad. But you know, I just want to stress that it can be anyone. It can be any one of us at any given time. So be grateful for your running. Be thankful. It is truly a precious, precious gift. Yes, we have bad workouts, we have bad races, but at the end of the day, you have two good legs. You're out there running. That is a miracle. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So be thankful for your running. Be safe, and pass those safety tips along, especially to runners you know who tend to run in the dark. So if you guys have any questions this week, feel free to log on to the Coach Chat page. Even if this video is not here, you'll see a calendar showing the upcoming Coach Chats. You can scroll down to the bottom. It'll say ask your question here. You can ask it anonymously. It can be about anything. Feel free to share those with me this week. It'll send them right to my email, and I'll answer them on the air next week. So I will see you guys then. Take care.